Well, hello everybody. This is Gen X Jace and the Boomer 2. This is what we're calling ourselves. This is our first episode. So me and Mike just thought we'd start together and start talking a bunch of shit like we always do. Keep this a little bit less political. How you doing, Mike?
I'm doing well, and I'm kind of excited about doing this because, clearly I talk a lot about politics. I have the podcast, I have the TikToks and YouTube and all that stuff. And I got to be honest with you, at some point you need a break from that. Now I'm going to continue doing what I'm doing on that side. That's not going to change. But it's nice just to sit down and talk some shit. Because I don't know if you've noticed, I'm a bit of a shit talker. So what we want to talk about is we want to talk about our differences. He's Gen X. I'm a boomer. I'm a young boomer. Talk about music, pop culture, all that sort of thing, and just kind of have fun with it for an hour or so and see how things go.
Yeah, we've kind of done this on your show, The Rational Boomer, and if you're not listening, why the fuck you here and start listening.
Yeah, good point.
So we've kind of gone into things like wrestling and music, and we've kind of seen some of the comments like, well, if where's the politics and stuff, and Mike was telling me that he gets a lot of views on his second account when he tells stories about Prince and stuff, and we were talking offline, and I mean you have quite a history. I mean I know you've talked about it and everything, but I mean you just told a story about Prince like this week, and it
Yeah,
just had me enthralled. So do
I've
you
got a
kind of
bunch.
want to do a real refresher on those that didn't see it on TikTok?
Yeah, no, the thing about it is I have kind of some might say a varied past, some may say a checkered past. Whatever it is, I've done a lot of different things. I worked in radio for the better part of my life, doing news, disc jockey, play-by-play of sports. I did a lot of interviews with pro athletes, got to meet and interview a lot of people. Um, I spent some time in the music business. It was because I just said fuck it, I'll do it, and we tried it, and it happened to be in Minneapolis, where my studio was kitty corner from First Avenue, right when Prince hit with Purple Rain and all that other stuff. So that was a crazy time in in Minneapolis at that point. I think I've told the story that I was producing commercials and that sort of thing because that was my background. Somebody came to me when everybody was pouring into the city. He said, "Do you do music?" Now I'm 23 years old, and I said, "Fuck yeah, I do music," even though I have no music ability. But I thought I'd do what I always do, just kind of get in there and fake it till you make it, and that's kind of what happened. So we had this influx of musicians coming in, and it was pretty nutty. I didn't make a lot of money, but I got some motherfucking stories. Now, the story you're talking about is when they filmed Purple Rain, because of the proximity of my building, First Bank Produce Building on First Avenue and 7th Street in downtown Minneapolis. I'm kitty corner from First Avenue. Most of the Purple Rain was filmed right in front of my building. So I got to watch what the fuck was going on. I'd never seen a movie filmed. And you have to understand, Prince at that time, he wasn't legendary Prince. He was the hot up and coming guy. We knew he was great, and we were proud of him in Minneapolis. But he didn't carry the status that he did even just after Purple Rain.
I'm gonna kind of lose some points with you, Mike, but I gotta admit something. I've
Go
never
ahead.
seen Purple Rain.
You have never seen Purple Rain.
I have buddies of mine that I mean, and I've talked about this before. I was raised in a very Christian household with my dad.
Hmm.
And and I don't know if I talked about this before, but I remember when I first saw Prince and I watched it with my grandfather, who was very liberal, my dad's dad, which is crazy because he has three sons that are very, conservative. And I watched it with him and my stepgrandmother, and it was When Doves Cry. And the first, and he'd been around for a while, I know that now, but he was in a fucking bathtub
Right?
naked. And he was getting up, and it's like, this is the days of Boy George and a lot of homophobia back then and stuff, calling guys stuff or whatever. Prince didn't give a fuck. Prince
No.
was so secure in himself that he was naked in a bathtub for probably his biggest video to that point. But you know what got me for him? It's the fucking music. I mean,
Yeah.
it was just that, that guitar solo when it starts out. I mean, it was just awesome. And I became a fan and I got more exposed to him and what he sang about, i.e., Darling Nikki. And
Yeah.
I was always told, hey, you got to watch these videos because my church group, they didn't want us to get exposed to, the music. And, I was listening at that time, Madonna, and my favorite band at the time was Alabama. I was, country and stuff.
Yeah.
And my next door neighbor, in addition, I was going to a Christian school, and my next door neighbor, he introduced me to a little band called AC/DC.
AC/DC.
And when I heard Back in Black and I heard Hell's Bells, it was everything I was supposed to not like. You know, I read Brian Johnson's book and he talks about, him singing about Satan's gonna get you. I mean, he just did that to piss off the religious people.
Sure, absolutely.
They
Yeah.
don't worship the devil. And I think Prince did it a lot too. It's like, oh, Darling Nikki was about a girl doing a natural thing, which people do in the privacy of their own home, sometimes bathroom.
Sitting in a hotel lobby masturbating to a magazine. Huh. That
Yes,
was a little jarring when you first heard it back in the 80s.
especially when you're like a teenage boy whose
Yeah.
favorite thing in the world is the Madonna Like a Virgin video, and she's just all over the place. Who's not
Right.
gonna like that?
Yeah.
And it's like to the day she dies, I will always have a thing for Madonna. And another one was Samantha Fox. I mean, we were as Gen X in the 80s so exposed to sex. Maybe that's why our country's so fucked up now, and we all
Could
voted
have
for
some.
Trump. I don't know. There's the politics stuff, but yeah, it's Prince just blew the door open, and it was like, you know what? If that's sin, what he's doing, I want some of that. I mean, it looked a lot better than going to church on Sunday, I must admit.
Prince later on became a Jehovah Witness, kind of like Michael Jackson did, and he didn't do a lot of the stuff that he did prior. I mean, he did some pretty dirty stuff. Erotic
Yeah.
City. He said the word "fuck" in Erotic City like a billion times, and it was a great song. The one thing I will tell you about When Doves Cry. I don't know if you've noticed this. I'm not a musician, but I've heard a lot of people talk about it. When he first wrote that song, it had a bass line. And then he said, I'm just taking the bass line out. There is no bass line in that song. And he took it to the record company and said, well, yeah, it sounds good, but you got to put a bass line in. And Prince said, yeah, no, I'm not going to do that. And they said, you got to put a bass line in. He goes, no, I'm not fucking doing that. That's what Prince did. When he first got his first deal, he's a kid of 18 or whatever, and he said he wants to produce my own stuff. And they said, no, you're not going to do that. They're not going to let an 18-year-old kid produce his own stuff. And then he said, well, fuck it then. I'm not doing it. He had a lot of conviction and a lot of knowledge of what he was capable of. And he came through every fucking time. Every idea that somebody thought was a bad idea, he was right.
Talk about, the kind of the sexual stuff. I mean, he had a number one song about females and males in the heat of passion doing what they do. Cream.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, a lot of people think it's about, you know, the coffee creamer. No, it's not about that. And did he, I mean, I didn't really follow him in the later years. Did he, I mean, you say become a Jehovah's Witness, did he like not do that kind of stuff anymore? Like
Oh,
get off?
yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you didn't hear him cuss at all. Back in the day, the 70s and 80s and stuff, all the musicians, they'd be doing the same shit, swearing and stuff. It was different with him because he was kind of separated or set apart from everybody else. That's the one thing about Prince. Prince, everybody thinks, what you have to understand about Prince is he was a great artist, probably one of the greatest instrumentalists of anybody in rock history. He was one of those guys where you could put him in a room with some recording equipment and uh, a bunch of instruments, put him in there for about 3 hours. He would come out with a completed, fully produced hit song. That's how good he was, and there wasn't many people that could do that sort of thing. But in the early days, Prince was an absolute dick. I mean,
Yeah.
he treated people horribly. He treated people horribly. And he's one of these guys. He's kind of like a Robin Williams. You know how they used to say Robin Williams used to steal jokes from people,
Yeah.
and nobody really bothered him about it because they love Robin Williams. But I think it was with Robin Williams. He heard things and he got inspirations from them. And Prince was kind of the same thing. I mean, he's obviously a genius. He can write his own songs, but there was a little thing that went around with the time because I know some people of the time back in the day, in the 70s or the 80s, somebody would say, because they'd all be working on their own songs, and somebody would say, "Be careful playing that riff in front of Prince. It may end up in one of his songs." And then, what are you going to do? Prince has got a hit with it, and he took it from you. So he was known for doing that sort of thing. The whole reason there is a time, the group, the time, the whole reason there is because he got his deal, and his friend Morris Day was a drummer, and he wrote a tune, and I can't remember which tune it was, but it was a tune that Prince loved, and he says, I want that song," and he said, "I'll tell you what I'll do. I will either give you $10,000 cash for that song, or I will help you put together a band and get you signed to a record deal." And of course, Morris Day took the record deal,
Yeah.
and that's how the time started.
And it's funny with that. I mean, it kind of reminds me of, other bands kind of around that era. Um, you're probably not a big, I don't know if you, I mean, I mean, I got into AC/DC and, one of the bands, actually, I think the 40th anniversary of it coming out was Slippery When Wet by Bon Jovi, which took them from like just a local hair band opening up for like Kiss and like, very bands to playing stadiums up to this day.
Right.
A lot of those bands, there's a documentary that came out a couple years ago on Hulu, I think it is, about Bon Jovi. It's pretty interesting. I mean, if you kind of like that era. But those bands, I mean, a lot of them, you think that you're in a band touring the world like that, that you're just a millionaire. But I
Oh,
mean, Bon
no.
Jovi was the one that had the record contract. It was the guys that, were like the Richie Sambora and the Tico Torres, the drummer, David Bryan, the keyboardist. I mean, they were the guys that were just paid bands. I mean, they were probably very well paid, but a lot of those guys, have like you know, like one guy has a record contract and a lot are just paid, and that's kind of what the time was, I guess, with Prince. And,
Yeah.
and there's always that musical force and that guy that's behind the music, and you always have the underlings come along. So just because you're in rock and roll band doesn't mean you're going to be loaded. I mean, I'm sure the guys in John and Bon Jovi are doing a lot better than the guys in the time because of the album covers or the album sales.
Well, yeah. The thing about it is, the time situation was a much different situation because it was all Prince. Prince wrote all the music.
Yeah.
He essentially produced all the music. He brought people in to play parts, but he mostly played parts. The guys in the band that we all know, the Jimmy Jams, the Terry Lewis, the Monty Moyers, the Jelly Bean Johnson, all those people. There was a period of time when they were first starting out, and I remember my friend Monty, who was the keyboard player, lived across the street from me. It's before I was ever in the music business. He got me tickets to see a show at what was then the Met Sports Center. It's a hockey arena. And it was the coolest concert I've ever seen. It was Apollonia 6, The Time, and then Prince. And The Time absolutely blew Prince off the fucking stage. They were far and away the best act that night. But all these guys in this band, save for Morris Day. At that time in the 80s, they were all making about $300 a week. No matter how many hits they had, no matter concerts they had, they were getting paid a salary of $300 a week. Now, Morris was getting paid more because it was his thing given to him by Prince. And Prince was making all the money off the fucking songs.
Was Apollonia, was that anything to do with the girl that was in the movie?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I know
Well, it's no, no, it started out to be Vanity 6.
yeah, Vanity, because I remember Vanity, the girl, because she dated Nikki Sixx from Motley Crue. I remember
Right.
her. I remember she was an actress, and the girl was gorgeous.
She
And she got
was. And
religion there at the end too. She got real religious there at the end too. It's like they had all their fun in the 80s and they got religion in the 90s. It's like,
well, what happened was, as I understand it, Vanity it was Vanity Six at first. They were touring. Maybe it was Vanity Six I saw with them
Yeah.
in that concert. But what happened is prior to the movie, there was a falling out between Prince and Vanity, and
Uh,
said, "Well, get me another hot brunette," and that's what they did. And Apollonia became the uh, the star in Purple Rain. You know what's interesting? You know who Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis are, right? Super producer group.
didn't they do
They
Janet Jackson?
Yeah, they did Janet Jackson's Control album. Um, what's interesting, they were a pivotal part of the time. But prior to the Purple Rain movie, they got fired by Donald. They got fired by Prince because what was happening was Prince told them, they said, "Listen, I don't want you producing anybody while you're working for me." They
Wow.
said, "Yeah, cool." Then the SOS band called them and said, "Hey, you want to produce us?" And they said, "Of course." Yeah. So they went down and they produced them, and they had to go back and remix, and there was some delay for the start of whatever tour Prince had. So they went down to produce this album or finish mixing this album. Snowstorm hit.
Mm.
Snowstorm hit, and they came. They didn't make it back to the concert.
Oh,
So basic. So when they came back, Prince didn't say much, as I understand it. But toward the end of the show, he basically went up to him and said, "We're finishing this tour, and then you guys are done. You're gone." So when Purple Rain came around, neither Jimmy Jam or Terry Lewis was in the movie, and I don't know if people realize that. And that's I, the guy who replaced Terry Lewis is the bass player is named Jerry Hubbard. That's the guy I represented right after Purple Rain. We connected up with him, and it was weird. He's still a weird guy, but nice
wow.
enough.
It's amazing how one little, what's it, act of God, I guess, can kind of fuck you over. I mean,
Yeah,
snowstorm. I mean, and you said SOS. Who is the SOS? Is that a
it was it was an R&B band, the SOS band. Now Jimmy and Terry didn't exactly get fucked over. They went on to be the hottest producing team in all
true?
of pop and R&B music. They made way more money than they would have made if they stuck with the time. But so they were fine, and it worked out just fine. But that's how it was with Prince. Prince was very paranoid about stuff. And I know this because I know all the people that work with him. And they did one little thing, fucking fire him. He did some crazy shit. He was kind of a dick. He was kind of a paranoid dick. Now, he got better over the years. But what happened was when he behaved like that, everybody in the music business was trying to emulate Prince. So they all behaved like that. The
Mm.
guys who worked for him that got screwed over in that sense, they went on and screwed over other people. It was kind of a dirty business in Minneapolis at that time.
I remember in when he did the Batman soundtrack, and
Hmm.
Batman was like the hottest thing. I mean, I was 16 years old, 16 or 17, what, 89. I mean, I was a metalhead at the time, but I liked Prince. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I grew up liking Michael Jackson, Madonna, but I outgrew them. I never outgrew Prince. I listened to Prince through the 90s, um, up through a lot of stuff. I mean, I didn't, listen to a lot of stuff, but when people ask me the king of pop or the who's better, Michael Jackson or, Michael Jackson or Prince, to me it's Prince because I
Oh,
never
no
outgrew
question.
him. Michael Jackson was kind of when I was a younger kid. Thriller was great. It was the biggest album ever, blah, blah, blah. Still looks good to this, sounds good to this day, but I mean, Prince stays with you. It's like that. I can go back and listen to Prince. I mean, I don't listen to Michael Jackson that much, but I still, put that on there. But Prince is something that, I never outgrew. And like I said, I was into Metallica and, a lot of the heavy bands in the late 80s. But man, that Bat Dance soundtrack, dude, and I love the freaking movie.
Oh,
And
I
I
did
mean, I
too.
didn't love Kim Basinger back then either, especially Prince. So, I
Yeah.
mean, that he was kind of I mean, I heard he was a kind of a diva. Can you imagine having to deal with Jack Nicholson, Kim Basinger, and Prince if you're like an assistant or something back then? I mean, they didn't pay those assistants enough, probably.
Yeah, I would say calling Prince a diva makes a lot of sense. One of the stories I told on that video that you're talking about when I was watching them film, I remember one particular scene where Prince is driving up in his purple motorcycle, his now famous purple motorcycle. He's got the cool outfit on,
Yeah.
but he's only 5'2" and a buck 15, so he's not a big guy. And so he's pulling up on the motorcycle, trying to look all cool. He puts his foot down, and the bike's too heavy, and it falls over on top of him. So there's Prince with the bike on top of him, or half of him, and he is fucking spitting mad. He gets up and he starts stomping away, which was funny because he has these little heels on, and it just sounded clip, clop, clip, clop, and he's spitting and motherfucker this and motherfucker that, and he ran into the trailer. We didn't see him for 2 hours. It was just, you know, I'm not even making fun of him. It's just a weird contrast when you see somebody on stage or in movies that's always cool, and then you see that you go, "Whoa, he's human."
Well, I remember my dad when I was a kid that, I mean, when he found out how little Henry Winkler was, Bonzi, because you got this
Yeah,
guy, hey, the coolest guy, the greaser from the 50s and stuff. And you see and the guy's like just short. And then it's just like, oh wow. That happened to me one time when I was at the gym. You can tell I go to the gym weekly,
yeah,
daily. And this has been a few years. And I San Antonio Shawn Michaels, and he walked by me and he's just like this little guy. I'm like, dude. And it kind of goes back to like when I got to meet Whitesnake. I mean, it's like you almost perception of them changes when you see them in person. And I can imagine that with Prince. But I mean, because didn't he have to wear those like kind of high heels in the
yeah.
movie to make him look taller with the girl or whatever? I mean, it's the old saying, never meet your heroes. I mean, it's like you're going to realize they're human. It's like, well, that sucks.
The
He's
funniest,
human.
funniest thing I ever heard somebody say was Prince is the only guy that wears high heels, feminine clothing, makeup, and effeminate hair, and will still steal your girlfriend.
Yeah.
And that's the fucking fact. I mean, people, my wife loved Prince. Everybody I know that women especially that saw him love Prince. He had he was very charismatic. When you're talking about Michael Jackson and Prince, I would say Michael Jackson might have an edge over Prince as an entertainer,
I can see that.
but as a pure musician and performer, I think Prince beats him all the way. And like you say, it holds up more. I mean, because there's more substance to what Prince is doing. A lot of the Jackson songs are very good and very rhythmic and huge hits, but there are only some songs that stick with you forever. And then that's the one thing I was telling somebody, everybody talks about Justin Bieber. And it was when my wife and I were going to a Bob Seger concert,
Hmm.
kind of a blues rocker from the 70s.
Oh yeah, Bob Seger's great.
He's fucking awesome. And Cindy
Yeah.
and I saw him a couple times toward on his last tour or whatever. And here's this guy. He looks like my neighbor down the street. He doesn't look like anything different than any one of us, but he still sounds great. And as I'm sitting there, I said to my wife, I said, we're watching Bob Seger 40 years after he comes out. Do you think that people will be going out to watch Justin Bieber 40 years from now? And I just don't think they will. Like you said, there's a certain amount of staying power with the boomer generation. And for me, it's the 70s because that's when I was a teenager. 60s, I like. I was pretty young at the time. 70s, for me, it's hard to beat the 70s. Anybody you tell me in the 80s and 90s, hard rock or whatever, I can give you another one that's just as good or better. Everybody talks about heavy metal and Metallica. Okay, Led Zeppelin.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, that's what we were kind of talking of offline, how we kind of wanted to kind of, how the kind of the boomer music, and I say boomer music, I mean like Stones, Paul McCartney, how, you know, how that's, has, I mean, sorry, Gen Xers, but it's going to suppress our music. I mean, all our guys, or a lot of them are gone. You got Kurt Cobain, you got, Chris Cornell, some great voices, but you still have Paul McCartney, you still have Mick and Keith. Um, you still have Robert Plant. He's doing his little music with Alison Krauss now. I just wish he'd bust out a whole lot of love, but he can't do that anymore.
Right.
And Paul McCartney, I mean, there's always a question about, and I don't know how you take this, who the greatest rock and roll band of all time is. And to me, it's the Stones. And I think the Beatles had their maybe musically and inspiring, but I think all the time greatest rock and roll band of all time is the Stones. Because the Stones have that sound, that Keith Richards sound that you just can't. I mean, you know what it is when you hear that riff of like, Start Me Up or, Jumpin' Jack Flash. To me, the Stones are just they just if I could ever be in a band, would be the Stones, after I sold my soul to the devil like Robert Johnson, because that's what they're. But when you look at Paul McCartney too, I mean, Gen X has no, I mean, who do we have? Eddie Vedder? I mean, nothing against Pearl Jam. I love Pearl Jam. Dave Grohl, I mean, we don't have, if you had to match Gen X music against Boomer music, for me, my two top bands in my life are Boomer bands. They came from the 70s. You know, that's my take as a Gen Xer.
But the thing about it is it's hard for me. It would be hard for me to pick out who the greatest rock band ever is because it depends on what you call a rock band.
Yeah, it's
Um,
subjective too.
I mean, you have that AC/DC shirt on, right? And I'm not big on heavy metal. Fucking love AC/DC. You can't help but move when you hear AC/DC.
Mhm.
Led Zeppelin, obviously a great band. Rolling Stones, always obviously a great band. Um, and the thing with the Beatles, I see them as a rock band, but I see them almost more as a pop entity. You listen to their music, it's more poppy, and I'm not trying to diminish them, but there are so many bands in the 70s that you could call rock. What about Leonard Skinner? I bet you there would be somebody who'd fight us here to tell us Leonard Skinner was the best.
Yeah.
ZZ Top,
Oh
same
yeah.
thing. People might do that. Grateful Dead. I'm not a huge fan of Grateful Dead, but I don't hate them either. There's so many, and I think that's what it was about the 60s and 70s, particularly. There was so many good ones that came out. It's impossible to really pick. It depends on who you are, what you like, and what kind of niche genre you like. Because the Eagles are a rock band too. And who are you going to say that's better than the Eagles? Not many people. I don't think we can pick the best rock band of all time. I just don't think it's possible.
Yeah, I think my mind more is like if you had to pick, because of longevity, because
Oh,
everything's
longevity,
subjective.
yeah.
Yeah, everything's subjective because there's one band that people love and they sometimes ask it on TikTok, and when you answer it, they're like, "Oh my God, what is wrong with you?" Like, what is one band you could never get into? And that's Pink Floyd. I guess because I've never been a stoner. I'm not saying they suck because they
No.
don't, because obviously they're still, there's two instances of the band right now, and they're both still, doing things, I mean, I'm sure the light show is great. It's like every weekend down at the local theater for the last 40 years. And you got bands like Rush, who's not everybody's cup of tea, because to me, Rush is great, but it's like the voice is Geddy Lee's voice. The music's great. It's just that voice. But if you can listen to Bob Dylan, I guess you can listen to Geddy Lee. But it's another 70s band. I mean, you had so many 70s band. You had Alice Cooper, you had the Eagles, Kiss, Aerosmith, who doesn't I
Yeah.
don't I think is one of the greatest American rock bands ever. They're not everybody's cup of tea, but they had 3 decades of just monster success. But
Well, and
that's
that's what I'm wondering is are the 70s, let's just leave it in the 70s, are they an aberration? I mean, because you have the 60s and we had some great bands coming out of the 60s. They didn't hold on as long. I wonder if it does, I wonder if it isn't that we had the turmoil in the 60s and everybody was trying different things. And then once we got out of the 60s, it kind of homogenized and refined down. And that's why we got so many creative people and so many rock bands and individual singers. I mean, you can look at pop in the 70s. I worked on a show one time where it was all just one hit wonders, and some of those songs are fucking amazing that are one hit wonders. I mean, if you go on TikTok right now, even to this day, you'll hear the song Brandy 10 times, and that came out in the early 70s, and I love the song.
yeah.
But there are so many songs like that And I've always wondered, do I think the 70s are the best era because that's when I grew up? That's when I came of age? I suppose that's possible. Or I could just be right. I don't fucking know.
I see. I'm with you on that. I mean, I love the '70s. Obviously, the bands I listen to, but to me, it's the '80s, and I think
Yeah.
it's the same thing. Like you say, it's the era that I grew up in. Uh, it seems like the '70s were like kind of your coming of age, and the '80s were just the freaking, balls out, coked up party. I mean, you look at somebody like that was you look at people that were like rocking in the '70s with like Ozzy.
Right.
He was all, in the Sabbath in the '70s. I mean, he got glammed. Even Ozzy went glam in the
Yep.
freaking '80s. Judas
Yep.
Priest went, I mean, the heavy metal. I mean, Metallica didn't because they kind of came out of it, but a lot of people did. I mean, you look at Rod Stewart. I mean, probably my favorite singer of all time. I mean, dude's always had great hair, but man, some of that shit that he did, I was listening to. I always like the kind of look at like bands that like you always kind of wonder what like what Maggie May era, every picture tells a story. Rod Stewart would think about the Rod Stewart doing Love Touch. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, because it's like, and it's like, Kiss, they wore more makeup in the '80s than they did in the '70s, up
Right.
there.
Right.
And the '80s were just, and a lot of bands are like ashamed of that. And I don't get that because I think, it's part of your history. Like Bon Jovi won't even recognize the stuff before he went country. Heart's like that. Heart's another band that was great in the '70s and also had a great, and a lot of them were bigger in the '80s than they were. I mean, Fleetwood Mac, I mean, they weren't bigger in the '80s, but they were pretty glammed up too. But the '80s were just a big party. And I think the '70s and '80s and I think the '90s kind of had you return back to that '70s vibe because you had guys looking like, they did in the '70s, like, as Gene Simmons would say, it looked like one of the guys that cleaned your pool, not a rock star. Because I think
Right.
people just got tired of all that excess, and that's how grunge kind of came about.
Well, and I think that it depends on where you are in your life as to how you perceive the
Yeah.
music. In the 70s, I was a teenager. I was a fucking madman. I was drinking every night, going partying every night. But 1983, I got married. In 1987, I had my first son. So in the 80s, it was kind of a time where you better get a fucking job, motherfucker, and you better start straightening out and you better start doing things. So while music was part of it, and there was some great music in the 80s, it didn't have the same impact on me because I had to pay the fucking bills. So
True.
because of where I was, I maybe didn't realize I was in my 20s in the 80s. So and I can think of a lot of songs and a lot of acts. But when my sons were born and in the early 2000s, when they're playing songs for me, I go, the fuck is this? This doesn't even, I mean, one of the first songs my oldest son played for me, and he's like 10 at the time, maybe, um, was, and this is before 2000, was Bop by Hanson.
Yeah.
And I thought, that's kind of catchy, but fuck, this is so wimpy.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you ever think about like maybe you were born too soon? Like, can you imagine yourself as a wild man in the '80s? I mean, would you even be alive today?
No, no. No, I mean, as it was being living through the 70s is an absolute miracle. I mean, when I think about the things we did back then, I'm going, fuck. I mean, put it this way, I've told my kids this. I say, you can be mad at boomers for anything, but the only thing you really can be mad at boomers is ruining it for you. Because we did everything in the 70s. We never got caught. Then we grew up and said, our kids aren't doing that bullshit and clamped everything down. So you don't have the freedom. You don't have the excitement that we had because we had no fucking guardrails. It was a free for all. As long as you don't get caught, it's perfectly legal.
I kind of think also too, as music goes along, it deteriorates. I think you just I mean, maybe it's getting older, but the music, a lot of people will, hey, try to listen to new music, and it's just what I do nowadays is not so much listen to new artists. I listened to artists that maybe I didn't give a chance back then,
Yeah.
because I really, I really wasn't an Iron Maiden fan back in the 80s, but they're one of my favorite bands now. Like in the 90s when I saw them a few times,
Hmm.
and that kind of my genre was my favorite era was the hair bands and hard rock. I liked all kinds of metal. I liked everything from like Poison to Slayer. I liked metal, and that's what I still listen to.
Yeah.
And there's probably not too many rock bands that I don't like. Maybe and I don't hate Pink Floyd, but I just can't get into them. They're just a little too mellow for me. But I think as we get older, and I think, as we get older, we kind of don't appreciate music as much because they say like after 30, it's really hard for you to listen to new music. I mean, there's
Yeah.
some kind of study
I
with
believe
that.
that.
But I always think that always thought that grunge, I hated it when it came out because it's like you didn't have to have talent. And and
No.
and and if I piss anybody off, I mean there's grunge bands that have talent, don't get me wrong, but there were a lot of them that didn't. And to me, a lot of that was like punk music. I could never get into punk. I never have understood the Sex Pistols because it's just yelling. I mean, it doesn't do anything for me. And I've tried to listen to it. I mean, I think Green Day's pretty cool, but they got melody. But when you're out there, I mean, it just, it's like those metal bands that they sound like the Cookie Monster when they're singing rah rah rah. I mean, it takes a certain amount of talent, I guess, and I think there's a lot of bands that should have made it, and there's a lot of bands that maybe shouldn't have, and I think that happened a lot in the 90s.
Well, that's interesting. You mentioned the grunge, because I graduated from high school in '78. I had an office downtown Minneapolis. My first studio downtown was across from a bar called the Longhorn, which was a hotbed for punk music.
Mm.
Now, in my late teens, early 20s, I did not get punk music. I don't, but I'm intrigued by it. When I see documentaries, I watch them because I like to see how people decided they like this and what made somebody better, at least based on those standards. I, for the life of me, don't get punk music. And
Neither
then
do
you
I.
got some of the pop artists that were kind of punk pop too. And then I started getting that. Somebody like what's the word? What's the group? The song is Joe Jackson. Joe Jackson, is she really going out with him? That was
Mhm.
kind of punk or new wavy, or
Okay.
uh, or when Billy Joel came out with Glass Houses. Some of those were getting a little more jagged than what Billy Joel used to do, like Glass Houses and stuff. So you could see the influence of punk into regular music, but I never grasped punk music like you. I wasn't as sophisticated enough to understand Pink Floyd. I knew a few of their hits and I liked them, but I wasn't a Pink Floyd fan. And at the same time, you mentioned Rod Stewart and Maggie May, right?
Yeah.
There were, I love Rod Stewart. Trust me, I've seen him in concert, but there are some songs that just get way over fucking played since they came out in the 70s. And a song like Maggie May, I can't listen to it anymore. I've heard it a billion times. I'm bored with it. Now there are other, you know what my favorite song of Rod Stewart's is? And since you're a fan, what's your favorite song that he does?
My favorite song of Rod Stewart. Oh God, ooh, that's probably Every Picture Tells a Story.
Okay.
That's probably no, 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 no. I was only joking. That's my
That's a good
favorite
one.
Rod Stewart. And that's a deep truck. That's one that a lot of people don't know, but it would have to be, I mean, early stuff, but yeah, I was only joking.
Well, my favorite Rod Stewart song, because I listened to a lot of Rod Stewart. I was a senior in high school when Tonight's the Night came out. And everybody's going, what the fuck does he mean by that? That's kind of cool.
He got
But
banned by the BBC.
it did. But my favorite song of his is a deep track too. And it's on one of his albums. I listen to it all the time to this day. And the song is called The Killing of Georgie.
Okay.
Fucking
Very,
great song.
very
Great song.
controversial song for the day.
It was controversial for the day, but it told a great story. It had a great tune. It had a great hook. It had a certain amount of compassion in it. I like that song. That was great.
I saw Rod Stewart. I've seen Rod Stewart about 5 or 6 times, and I remember the time I saw him was in the early 2000s, and this is when I was kind of partying. and I had third row for Rod Stewart, and it was when he was doing half rock, half standards.
Right.
So I go and see him and sit through the rock stuff, and I leave there the standards, and I'm like, and 53-year-old me now is like, you're a dumbass, dude. That's Rod fucking Stewart, but the 20-something-year-old me back then was like, oh, I just wanted to hear that stuff, but. I saw him in Houston about 2 years ago with with not Pink Floyd, with Cheap Trick, another great band.
Yeah.
And he played that song that came out in the early 90s called Rhythm of My Heart, and it was dedicated to Ukraine. And this is still when, Biden was president and stuff like that. But I was like, that's a very ballsy move to do in the state of Texas is to still support,
Yeah.
Ukraine. He played like and everything. And he even said something about, how like some people should be president. I mean, I saw him in Vegas actually. I saw him in Vegas probably about 10 years ago. He did, it was great. And I liked about it because I was what, 42 at the time, 43. I was one of the youngest in the crowd. So I mean that's what's good. But the guy can still play, he can still sing. Dude's 80 plus years old. I mean, Rod Stewart's great. Killing a Georgie. That probably fueled some rumors about the whole, stomach pumping incident that, they talked about in
Yeah.
the.
Everybody said he was gay. I think it's clear he's not gay.
Well, if
He's
that's gay,
dating.
then that's not a bad play, and I mean, yeah, Rod Stewart's great. I mean, he's kind of a dick though. I saw that him and his son, they were, I guess, getting they didn't have their IDs or something to get into a hotel a few years ago, and they gave this, probably minimum wage hotel front desk clerk, a bunch of shit. Well, you know who I am, kind of shit, and I'm like, and I think the guy sued him, and I think he said some shit about Elton John too, and I think he pissed Elton John off. So, like they say, don't always meet your heroes, because I mean,
Do you remember the band that Rod Stewart was in before he was on his own?
faces.
The Faces.
Yep, they stole the Ron Wood from him. That's what he always said that. And that was weird back then too, is because his first album, The Faces, played on that album.
Oh, did they really?
Yeah, the one with Maggie May, his first like big album, and that had that one there. Because it's like, and then because it's like back then, I mean, you look at the video. I mean, it's The Faces playing that,
Wow.
and yeah, The
I
Faces
didn't
are
realize
great.
that.
Yeah, I saw first time I saw Rod Stewart on Unplugged back in '93, and he had like a couple of the guys in the band. Not he didn't have Ron Wood with him because Wood's still with the Stones. But yeah, he had some there. But I mean, yeah, Rod Stewart's another guy that I can listen to that, I have my playlist on Spotify and I'll put on there and yeah. Yeah. And you talk about Rod Stewart and you talk about ripping artists off. I mean, he is on record is accusing Led Zeppelin of stealing stuff from the Faces.
Really?
And you listen to Black Sabbath and you listen to, you know, Zeppelin and I mean, I don't know. It just seems back then it seemed kind of harder to do that because it wasn't like mass played and stuff. I mean, there was that lawsuit that Led Zeppelin was going through with the with Spirit, I guess, for Stairway to Heaven,
Yeah.
and it was still in court, and it's like half the fucking band from Spirit's dead. I mean, it's like I a lot of good it does then. I think Jimmy Page finally settled it, but it's like. Yeah, I mean, have you seen that documentary on Netflix, Becoming Led Zeppelin?
I haven't yet, but I'm going to watch it. I think my wife watched it, but it's intriguing. I still remember being a little kid. I don't know, 12 years old maybe. I heard Stairway to Heaven on the radio.
Yeah,
I ran up to Woolworths and wanted
Warhorse.
to buy that. I wanted to buy that single so bad,
They didn't have
and
it.
then I was disappointed because they never put it out as a single. I had to buy the whole album, and I'm
The only
12. I don't have any money.
yeah, the only single they really did was like a whole lot of love, and that was like through like arm twisting because they didn't
Yeah,
want to do it. But I mean, Zeppelin wasn't a singles band. They were, and I always remember back in the day, it's like you could always tell when the DJ was gonna like go smoke a cigarette or take a bathroom break. He had to, put on Stairway to Heaven or In the Gata La Vida by Iron Butterfly, and
I think Stairway to Heaven was, if I remember right, 7 minutes 12 seconds. Because I'd been a disc jockey and had those days where I had to go to the bathroom and time that shit out. But there are other rock bands from the 70s that aren't quite as prominent, but you got to put them in the mix too. A good example is Grand Funk Railroad.
Yeah.
Great band, fucking great band. And there were a lot of bands like at that level that put out some amazing stuff into the 70s, some of them all the way into the 80s. It would just seem like a rich era for rock music and pop music too. There was tons. I mean, fucking yacht rock comes from the 70s, basically. We didn't call it yacht rock back then, but we do now. And uh, to, there are so many songs that I've heard a billion times and I still like them, like Baby Come Back from Player. A lot of those pop type songs, there's some incredible ones.
What is who okay, Baby Come Back, a little trivia time.
Okay.
Okay, besides Baby Come Back, who is probably the most famous member of Player?
Oh, I don't, I mean, I, I'm not going to be good at this part.
Okay.
Famous player, a famous.
The who okay, what is Player besides Baby Come Back? There's one member in the band that was known for something else besides being a one-hit wonder.
Well, player's not a one hit wonder. They had a few hits.
Well, but I
Player's
mean
not.
big. Yeah, well, you know what I mean.
No, they had top 40 hits. They are one hit wonders. But I think there was a guy in player that was also in Ambrosia. Is that what you're thinking about?
The bass player, I think it's a bass player, name's Ron Moss. He was Ridge Forrester on Bold and the Beautiful soap opera, which was
Oh
very
no,
good.
shit.
Yeah, he
Oh,
was.
I
Yeah.
didn't know that.
Yeah. That's if you ever look at it, look up Ridge Forrester from there. Yeah, it was he left the band because he's actually tours. A lot of those bands, like in America, they'll play like this the fair. They'll play like Loverboy will play the state fair or something, but they go to like Japan or England or I mean Europe. I mean, they're huge. And he left that thing to do this stuff with Player and that they had this other guy replace him and this lady like I saw it on Facebook one time and she goes, "Oh, you ought to come back and play Ridge again." And he was like, "Well, that house has been sold and there's a new car in the garage." Like that float roll's already been done. But I
Yeah.
remember Player a few years ago. I just wonder how much money. Hopefully they had their rights with that Swifter commercial. That Baby Come Back. That
Oh
Swifter
yeah.
commercial was on every fucking 5 minutes, and
Yeah.
it's a great tune, man. I mean, that's something that comes on the radio. I mean, I don't listen to the radio, but I have my yacht rock mixes and stuff like that. But yeah, Player, yeah, Rich Forrester on Bold and the Beautiful. He was in, and I remember when I seen that, I was like, that looks like the dude from Bold and the Beautiful because you like in the '80s, you grew up watching that stuff. Yeah, so a little bit of
I
trivia.
had no idea. I had no idea. Another great yacht rock band from the 70s that we loved was Little River Band,
Mhm.
reminiscing, uh, a cool change, a bunch of hits. I'll tell you a story about this. My wife and I both loved Little River Band, and they were going to be in town at a casino. So we bought tickets and we were going to the casino. And I'm looking at all these people and I'm looking at the list of names. I go, I never thought to check this out. How many of the original people are still in Little River Band? So I'm going through it. None that were the originals. There's one guy who was in the band in 1980 or 81 after they had all their hits. So he was really Little River Band was Australian, and this guy wasn't even Australian. And apparently there was some fight about it, and so these guys are touring around. But the most fucked up thing is it's after the show. I know none of these guys are the real ones, and they come out and sit at a table and they're signing autographs. My wife wanted an autograph on a hat. I don't know why, because these people, I mean, they sounded good, but
Yeah.
it wasn't the Little River Band. And as my wife's coming up the table, I got my phone out and I'm going to take a picture. Honest to God, a security guy comes up and says, "Nope, no pictures." I go, "What is Paul McCartney here? Because these fuckers are nobody." I
Right,
can't,
brother.
yeah, get over yourself, man. You're a cover band, is what you are.
Yeah, they had that thing Kiss did that with the Of course, they had, the four member members and stuff, and they, in the 80s, they took the makeup off and got back together. Well, back in the 90s, they got back together with the two other guys. That lasted about a whole 4 years, and they realized why they kicked them out in the first place.
You're
So
talking
what,
about Peter
uh,
Criss and Ace
Ace
Frehley.
Frehley. So what Gene and Paul did is they bought the rights to the makeup.
Right.
So they did a farewell tour in in 2000. I saw two shows of it and stuff, and then probably about 3 years later, they realized, well, we don't necessarily like, farewell. We still want to play, but we still want to play with those guys. So they got two other guys, put the Ace and Peter makeup on them. I mean, the Kiss freaking female went, it's just a cover band. And I saw that band. I mean, that band ran for like 20 years. I mean,
Yeah.
I thought they were better. I mean, I thought they were better musicians than Peter and Ace. And I get the original one there, it's the magic of their Force Four, but I was fine with it. It's my favorite band. I still get to see them. But yeah, that happens a lot. Foreigners like that too. I think Lou Graham's going to come back and do some shows, but they had a guy that was their singer. And to me, when you lose a singer, it's very hard to get that back unless you're like Van Halen or something or
Yeah. Yeah.
AC/DC, and but they had the guy, he was in a band called Hurricane, which was an 80s band. I mean, the guy was a great singer. But it's like to me, you don't have Lou Graham. It's not Foreigner. I mean,
No.
I love Foreigner too. But you have a lot of bands that do that. I mean, hell, Bad Company went on without Paul Rogers. Can you imagine that? I mean, they had a pretty good run
That
in the 80s, but they're
that's
back.
amazing. But there have been some bands that have been successful at switching lead singers. Very successful at that. A band comes to mind is Chicago.
Yeah,
I can't remember his name now, but the guy playing, he was a guitar player. He wrote a lot of the songs, and he was the
it's Sarah.
singer. No, Peter Cetera came later. He was the second one. God, what was his name? I should know this, but he was one of the original members of Chicago, and he was the voice of Chicago. The old songs, and then they bring in Peter Cetera, and they still end up
Oh,
being
love that
very
era.
successful.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it was two different eras. It was still Chicago, and I will tell you, I saw Chicago one time in a casino. They were fucking outstanding. Because I remember listening to Chicago when I was really young, Saturday in the Park and stuff like that, way back when, and they were outstanding. I couldn't believe it. That's the thing. If we went back to the 70s and we looked at the Rolling Stones or we looked at Chicago or some of these other bands and we said, listen, when you're in your 50s and 60s and they're in their 80s, they're still going to be playing. And we go, fuck no. Fuck no. That's not going to happen. But how the fuck does Mick Jagger still dance on the stage when he's literally over 80? For fuck's sake.
He's still fathering kids.
I stumbled to the refrigerator and I'm 65.
Yeah, I read an interview with Keith Richards, and he was talking about how Mick gets up, plans his day, probably goes for a jog in the morning. He said Keith Richards wakes up, I'm just fucking glad I'm alive.
Yeah. And how is he alive?
I don't know, man, but he quit smoking. I read an interview with him, and during COVID, he got bored with smoking because he was just sitting around and he quit smoking. But have you ever seen Keith Richards' fingers? I mean, they are just, they're like, I mean, just from playing so many years. And it's just, I mean, I am convinced they are going to play until one of them is dead. I mean, or both, they're all dead. I thought they'd end after Charlie Watts
Yeah.
because I thought he was a big thing, but they went on. But, I mean, Mick Jagger, I mean, he's still knocking, he has like a young kid. You know what he did too was pretty cool is that he went around when they were on that last tour and he went to like dive bars just as himself to kind of hang out and shit. I mean, can you imagine? And people are like, motherfucker looks like Mick Jagger and stuff. But Keith Richards did all the smoking and all the drinking and stuff. And Mick Jagger is the one that, was the runner, the jogger. And who has the health problems? It's Mick Jagger, not Keith
Yeah.
Richards.
Yeah. It's crazy. Well, there was another rock band that was big toward the end of the 70s uh, that had a change in voices too. Talking about Van Halen.
Yeah, yeah.
Wasn't a huge Van Halen fan, but I like some of their songs, Jamie's Crying, Renegade, stuff like that. But they
Let's stick.
started out with David Lee Roth
Yes.
and ended up with Sammy Hagar. Now there's a big argument which one was better. I understand why the Van Halens didn't like David Lee Roth after a while because he was like a cartoon character. He had a great voice at the time, and it fit for what they were doing. But Dave's got a little ADHD problem, I think.
He's still stuck in the 80s, dude. I mean, it's the Hawk, that influencer that we follow politics on. He's a big musician. I mean,
Yeah, he was a
he's like
drummer.
Lars Ulrich, one of Lars Ulrich's lawyers. And he did a TikTok the other day of a recent concert of Daily Roth singing, and it's not pretty.
Oh,
But I will
no,
tell
it's
you,
not
I
good.
saw Sammy Hagar. It was Sammy Hagar, Michael Anthony, and Jason Bonham, who's John Bonham's son. They play in a band called The Circle, and I saw them a few years ago and at a theater. Sammy can still sing, and Sammy's older. And people always say, "Well, who do you like better?" I mean, my era of Van Halen was Sammy. I didn't hear about Van Halen until Jump, and I tell people that, and they look at me like I have three heads. But 5150 with what they call him Van Hagar, that's Van Hagar's my era. But I love Van Halen too. I mean, I love, Everybody Wants Some, Jamie's Crying, like you said, Jump. I love all that stuff, but I'm a real big Sammy Hagar fan too. But it's subjective. There's no such thing as, who's better. I mean, it's you like this or not. But I will say this, Roth never did Hagar songs, but Hagar could always do Roth songs, and I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. David Lee Roth, he was just a joker. And I think both Van Halens were trying to be serious musicians and a serious band. And he comes out being this, clown show. You tell jokes like he said, yeah, it gets crazy, the groupies and all this stuff. And yeah, I'm trying to go to sleep and I got this woman pounding on the door. Finally, I got tired of it and let her out.
There's the guy that he produced Van Halen, and he produced the Doobie Brothers. I think he discovered the Doobie Brothers, Ted Templeton. He's a
At
producer. I'm sure
Templeton.
you've heard of him. I read his book. He actually wanted Sammy Hagar in the band because Sammy Hagar had played with a band before Van Halen called Montrose.
Right.
Montrose was another band that was very underrated that pretty much had that heavy metal sound from back then. You ever listen to Kickstart My Heart by Motley Crue and you hear the guitar, the whir, whir, that Montrose
Yeah.
did that first about, 20 years earlier.
Yeah.
But he didn't, I mean, it's weird about Ted Templeton. He wasn't a big fan of Roth, but he got it. He actually produced, I think, some of Roth's solo stuff. But he really pushed for Sammy Hagar to be with Van Halen before, because there was a time when Eddie Van Halen was so distraught about David Lee Roth that he wanted to join Kiss because Gene Simmons discovered Van Halen playing in the club. He passed on it because everybody told him they wouldn't be a big deal, and then they freaking became a big deal. I think
Right.
he produced one of their albums. They actually played on a couple of their songs, but yeah, he wanted out of the band. He wanted to join Kiss. I mean, I love Kiss, but it wouldn't have been a good fit. I mean, he needed to stay in his own band. But I can
No,
just
that wouldn't work.
imagine, but it may not have been as dramatic because Roth was pretty damn. I mean, Roth is probably one of the greatest frontmen. I mean, I'd never thought he was that great of a singer, but there is a band that they cover that David Lee Roth, they always, and I forget, it's not the Marshall Tucker band, but there is some band that they always claim that David Lee Roth ripped off. And I forget, it's some Southern band, but I saw it
Really?
on TikTok and they were talking to him, and it's like, that's David Lee Roth before David Lee Roth was David Lee Roth. And I forget the name of it, but it was a band that they ripped that they say David Lee Roth ripped off because that's who he wanted to be, and that's what he brought to the band. And I can't for the life of me remember who the band was.
Well,
But
um, there's the band you just mentioned is also a band that had an original singer and then a new singer. You mentioned the Doobie Brothers,
yes,
which was huge in the 70s when I was growing up. You had Tom Johnston as the lead singer at first, and then later on he left, and then it was Michael McDonald and some other people that were lead singers. But they're kind of like the Chicago type of band because they had such great music and the players were so good that it just it always sounded good, and you could almost put any number of voices in front of them.
Yeah, Ted Templeton talks about the Doobie Brothers, how he discovered them or like pretty much produced them and brought in Michael McDonald, which a lot of people believe ruined the Doobie Brothers. I think people are crazy for saying that because I love Michael McDonald. And there's another, there's a, is there, and speaking of Doobie Brothers and Van Halen and Michael McDonald, there's a song by Van Halen called I'll Wait that supposedly Michael McDonald helped write. And they pretty much did it without giving him credit. And it pretty much strained the relationship between Michael McDonald. And you listen to that song and you kind of realize, hey, that's not really a Van Halen song, but that's definitely a Michael McDonald song. That band I
Right.
was talking about was Jim Dandy and the Black Oak Arkansas. A lot of people say
Now,
that rips him off, and I saw it on TikTok. I'm not a big, I don't know who that is, but I was like, yeah, that looks like David Lee Roth.
yeah, yeah, this was big in the early 70s. It was Black Oak, Arkansas was the name of the band. And the song they had that was a big hit was called Jim Dandy, Jim
Yeah.
Dandy to the rescue.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
them.
no,
Okay.
yeah, no, I can see the comparison there. Black Oak, Arkansas wasn't a huge band. You know, they had a few hits, but I can see how David Lee maybe stole a little bit of. I guess the guy's name was Jim Dandy, who was the lead singer. At least he went by that. But the song Jim Dandy was a great song when it came out in the early 70s. Totally different era, but um, it's amazing how incestuous, and I mean this in good terms, music really is.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, I was watching a show, a documentary about Michael McDonald, and he had the song "What a Fool Believes," right?
Love that song.
Huge song, and he's playing these chords and stuff like that, and his buddy's coming over, and Michael McDonald just can't get it, lyrics or something, he can't get it, and his buddy comes to the door, knocks on the door, comes in, and said, what were you just playing? He goes, just something. I can't really get it. He goes, well, I'm hearing something. And his buddy was Kenny Loggins.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
So Kenny Loggins helped him write that song. There's a lot of that stuff going on. You know, it's a small group of famous people that are wealthy and they all um, interject themselves. The Eagles had different players all the time, too. You had Randy Meisner for one point, and then you had Timothy B. Schmidt, and it was weird how that era these people could kind of come and go in different bands and they could still maintain the power and popularity that they had in the first place.
yeah. That's like the story I heard Don Felder. If you like the Eagles, you ought to Google an interview that Don Felder did with Howard Stern probably about 15 years ago, and he was talking about how he wrote the thing for Hotel California just on his couch. Of course, it's overlooking Malibu Beach, you know,
Right.
and you're probably, had a little, little greenery going there with you, and he wrote that song and how he brought it to Don Henley and like Don Henley and Glenn Fry made the rest of it. I mean,
Right.
I think I mean, there's a couple old guys we can kind of say, well, they don't make music like that anymore. But I mean, anybody can make shit on TikTok now. I mean, you
Yeah.
see some of the stuff. There's some talented people out there. I don't know if the record companies, if there are anymore, they don't have the patience. You can't put a one, two, or three album out and become somebody. I mean, that started in the 90s. I mean, you look at somebody like Hootie and the Blowfish, huge album. Alanis Morissette,
Yeah.
huge debut album, and nothing ever again. Hardly. I mean, not to what it was before. So, I mean, the 70s and to the 80s to a point. I mean,
Yeah.
a lot of hair bands got more albums probably than they should have in the 80s. But I think, man, and I can agree with you on the 70s. So, I mean, you're not going to get an argument from me on that. So,
I know we'll get an argument from people in the audience because, you know, everybody has their favorites. And that's was my point. You can't really pick the best rock band ever, and it's hard to pick the best era ever. You know, you mentioned in the 90s how there was some kind of feel of the 70s and the 90s.
oh yeah,
And that's something that I noticed. It seems like when you have a generation comes out of when they're coming of age, and then 20 years later when they're parents, there's a revival of it. So in the 70s, the 50s were really coming back. You know, all the 50s songs,
Happy days.
the rockabilly stuff, Happy Days, all that stuff that was really, really coming back. And everybody's going, oh, 50s, cool. Um, like, for example, here's a guy I've seen in my town at my grocery store. Oh, what's his name now? You remember the group Stray Cats?
Oh yeah, Brian Seltzer.
Brian Seltzer. He apparently either has a studio around here. He worked for the Minnesota Orchestra for a while,
He still
but
plays. He was here in San Antonio not too long ago. He still tours.
yeah, oh yeah, he's very good. I love the Stray Cats because it
Oh
was
yeah.
hardcore rockabilly and it was kind of reminiscent of the 50s, obviously. Um, uh, and then so I saw him at a grocery store one time and I was going to walk up to him and I thought, I'm not going to be a dipshit like that. He had this beautiful renovated old truck that he was driving and he dressed like he dresses on stage, you know, with kind
His
of a
hair slicked back.
Western, yeah, and a hat. And I go, that's fucking Brian Setzer in this little town that I live in. Fuck's sake. But in the 70s, you got a lot of people referring back to the 50s and in the 90s. It would make sense that 20 years previous, the 70s would kind of bubble under.
I mean, look at Kiss. They got back together in '96. They're the biggest. That was the biggest tour. I mean, 2 years earlier, they couldn't play a freaking. They had to cancel their tour because nobody would see them.
Yeah,
So, I mean, yeah, it's all about nostalgia. And also with, you talk about the 50s. I mean, the 80s kind of had that too with La Bamba. A
yeah,
great story, a great movie that,
yeah. It was a great movie.
I mean, I'm glad that, Los Lobos tried to say. I mean, that was great, and yeah, and just different stuff. But, well, we made it through an hour, Mike, on our first episode. We didn't get in too big of an argument. I think it went pretty well.
Well, I don't think we're going to argue. Yeah, you know, this for the people listening, they're going, they didn't say Donald Trump one fucking time.
No,
The
I
point of the
did.
show is, well, I did inadvertently, but the point of the show is just try something different in addition, not in place of, but in addition to the other shit I do, we do. And you know, sometimes you just need to break away and reminisce or consider nostalgia, music. And we're not just going to talk about music every time. I've got tons of stories. You've got some stories. And, you know, we'll talk about movies and pop culture and that type of thing. Basically, it's going to be an hour of us just dicking around and making jokes and telling stories. And maybe there's people interested in hearing that. Maybe there's not. We'll find out.
Well, yeah, obviously when, I read some of the comments when I'm on and other guests are on and people aren't afraid to, express themselves. If you have something you want us to talk about, put it in the comments. We'll read about it. I mean, not necessarily we'll get to it right away, but, if you got something for us to discuss, I mean, we're pretty open about that. I mean, I think there's a lot of shit we'll talk about, movies. We'll, bring some people that like movies on, talk about music more, what happened in the years and whatever. I mean, we're open to anything. It's just, I mean, we both enjoy, just shooting the shit on stuff. So that's what we're just going to make a podcast out of it.
That's what we're going to do. And not unlike the Rational Boomer podcast, we're going to have people on, you know,
Yeah.
listeners who get into this, have a perspective they want to talk about, or maybe some interesting stories. You're welcome to come on. You know how to do it. Just email me and at rationalboomer@gmail.com. I'm hoping to get some guests on too. I have a few people that I know. Um, uh, the friend of mine, Monty Moyer from the time, I'm pretty sure I can get him on. I was hoping to maybe get St. Paul Peterson, who was in the group The Family, which was part of that whole thing. Um, One guy I'd really like to get on, and I sent a note to him, and I haven't heard anything back. He's on TikTok, Stephen Bishop. Stephen Bishop is one of the soundtracks of my life, On and On, Save It for a Rainy Day, all kinds of great
Maybe
movies. And
you
he,
off Tootsie.
maybe you off Tootsie, yeah. And he's got his brand new last album out. So I'm thinking, you want to promote it with a bunch of old people? We're here. We're
And I'm
here.
totally gonna rely on you, Mike, to bring your friends on because I don't have any friends, man. I mean, I got my dog, but she don't talk much.
Well, that's part of the reason we're doing the show to see if we can get Jace to find some friends.
Yeah,
So
and get out of the house every once in a while, but just tell old soul I ain't going nowhere near Austin, especially after 9 p.m. Screw that.
yeah, no shit, no shit. We're talking about the
Well,
serial killer down there.
yeah, we ought to have her or your wife on sometime talking about serial killers because that's something that I'm fascinated with, and it's something that I never got into. I mean, it's like I don't want to piss anybody off.
Well, see, and that's the thing about this show. We can talk about virtually everything or anything. And the thing about it is, these true crime things are a big deal to a lot of people.
Oh yeah.
Old Soul, especially my wife would never come on. She just won't do it. But Old Soul would. She, she has no problem talking. And we get her on a subject she's interested in or not pissed off about. It could be fun. And she's back in town now. Hopefully, she's going to be
Awesome.
on the regular show soon.
Yeah, I'd like to meet her face to face like I've done Eric already. So, and maybe drag TJ the plumber to on here, get him to talk something besides politics, you know.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Just a quick break to talk about something else because tomorrow morning I got to get up and talk about dirty diaper dipshit Donnie Trump. And I can only do so much of it without getting some kind of break. So I'm glad we had a chance to do this. We're going to do it more often. Initially, maybe once a week or something like that, just kind of a break. If you guys like it, we can probably do it more, do different things. If you want to participate, of course, we want you to. If you want to be on the show, send me an email and we'll work it all out. So,
And I've been very I've been doing my TikTok thing. I just throw shit out there. I talk every once in a while. It's fun, because I mean, it's like of course have these beautiful women in my inbox now. I mean, God, I found that just they want a relationship with me and everything,
oh,
and they
that's
have
amazing,
how
isn't
much
it?
money I don't have, and they kind of go away. So I mean,
There are women that come into my DMs that could be my granddaughters, and they are enthralled with me.
oh
I
yeah,
mean, I'm not surprised. I'm not
yeah.
surprised, but
Hey
it's
man, when you
just
got it,
goes to
flaunt
show.
it, man. It's just like and hey, come on the show, and unlike David Lee Roth, we won't keep the door locked. We'll let you out when we're done. So.
Absolutely. All right.
Thanks for
Well,
joining
thanks,
us.
Jace.
Yeah,
Yeah.
hey, I had a good time, man. I'm looking forward to the next one.
All right. We'll be talking soon, and we'll be talking to you very soon.